In this video we're going to look at how to draw a graph. Now when drawing a graph you want to make the best use possible of the graph paper. That is, you want to produce a graph that is as large as possible. You don't want the graph all crushed into one corner. This can be very important, particularly if later on you need to read any of the data back from the graph. Make sure you use a nice sharp pencil to draw your points on the graph and to add any lines. Now sometimes you join the points on the graph and on other times you will fit a line. Now when it comes to fitting a line, being it a straight line or a curve, make sure that the points are evenly balanced around that line. And if you are drawing a straight line, make sure you use a ruler. Clearly label the axes, including any units. It's absolutely critical that you include units. And then finally give the graph a title. So here's our graph paper. And the first thing we need to do is put on our points, as you can see we are doing here. And in this particular case I need to put in a line of best fit. And this is in fact a straight line, as you can see here, with the points equally balanced around it. Next I will add in a graph title and then label the axes, making sure that I include any units in brackets. So here's the x-axis label and here is the y-axis label, including any units. So the key points to drawing a graph are to make the best use of the available space on the graph paper, use a sharp pencil, plot the points clearly and add the line, and if you do add in a line, make sure it's the correct type, be it joining the points together or a straight line or a curve. Clearly label the axes and finally give the graph a title. So let's look at a worked example. Here I've set up a standard curve. I've taken known concentrations of protein running from 0 to 16 micrograms per mil and I've measured their absorbance in a spectrophotometer set at 595 nanometers. So I have my data nicely recorded in a table, but the question is, how would I go about plotting it on a graph? Well, first of all, I need to pick sensible ranges for the axes. Now, you always put the known, which in this case is the concentration, on the x-axis, so this is going to go on the bottom axis of the graph, and you put the unknown, the thing that you're measuring, up the y-axis on the vertical axis. Now if I don't select a sensible data range, so for example I've used 0 to 10 here on the y-axis, when I plot the data I find that everything is scrunched down at the bottom of the graph. This is clearly no good. I can't see how the data is scattered and I can't see where the line of best fit should go. So by selecting a more sensible range for the y-axis, in this case 0 to 1, I can then replot the data and as you can see the points spread out. I can then see where the line of best fit is going to go. I will give the graph a title, in this case standard curve for different concentrations of protein X plotted against absorbance, and I will also check at this point that I've got the points in the right location. I will then give the axes a label. The x-axis will be protein concentration, and again don't forget the units, which are micrograms per mil, and the y-axis will be absorbance. Now absorbance doesn't have any units, but what we typically do with absorbance is record the wavelength at which the spectrophotometer was used, in this case 595 nanometers. Once I've got the axes labelled, I can then fit my line, making sure that the points are evenly balanced around the line. And so the final graph should look like this. Now with this data I can then determine the gradient of the line if I so desire, and to do this I will draw the biggest possible triangle I can, working out the gradient, which in this case will be 0.8 divided by 15, giving a gradient of 0.053. Now if you're familiar with spectrophotometry, you will know that that is the extinction coefficient for this particular protein solution. The other thing I can use this graph for is as a standard curve. I've used protein concentrations at a known concentration, 0 to 16 micrograms per mil. I know the absorbance is here, and if I have an unknown absorbance, say 0.5, I can then work out what the concentration of that sample will actually be. So all I do is I run a line from the absorbance 0.5 over to my standard curve, drop a line down to the x-axis, and as you can see the value is 9.23 micrograms per mil. Now this is a slightly different data set. Here I've got an amount of protein running from 0 to 48, and this again is in micrograms, and we've got a slightly different absorbance. Here I've got 4 unknowns, 1 to 4. Unknown 1 has an absorbance of 0.167, unknown 2 0.406, unknown 3 0.703, and absorbance of unknown 4 is 1.189. Again, as I did in the last example, I can put the 0.07, the 0.46 and the 0.187. I can find those on the y-axis, the absorbance, draw a line across until it intercepts the graph line, and then drop a line down to the x-axis and get the concentrations. And by doing this we find that unknown 1 has a concentration of 9 micrograms, unknown 2 has 19.6 micrograms in the cuvette, unknown 3 has 33.9. Now unknown 4 has a value of 1.189, and this value is off the end of the graph. Now you should never extrapolate the data beyond what you've measured. So we can't go above the value for 48, which is 0.966. So all we can say about unknown 4 is that there is more than 48 micrograms of protein present in that cuvette. Now sometimes you will have to plot more than one set of data on a graph. If you do this, the standard approach is to use different styles of points for the different data sets so they can be distinguished. Sometimes you might even use a different style of line for the line of best fit so that you can see what's going on and which line is what. So in summary, when you're drawing a graph, make the best use of the space available on the graph paper. Use a sharp pencil and plot your points clearly, and when it comes to adding a line, being it a line where you're joining up the points or a line of best fit, a straight line or a curve, make sure again you draw that in with a nice sharp pencil. Clearly label the axes and don't forget to give the graph a title. And if you are plotting different data sets on the same piece of graph paper, make sure that you use different styles of points for the different types of data. And that's it. That is all there is to plotting a graph. Fairly easy and very straightforward.